I did some research on Ripple XRP's technical fundamentals. You always hear about Ripple being a centralized solution, but that's something I never really had validated for myself. So I took some time to go through the process of validating that, and I guess I can show you my work. There's some components to understand before we get into the protocol and the consensus algorithm. You have your server, which is just any server. It's basically a node on the XRP network. You have a ledger, which is just like Bitcoin's ledger. It's a list of who owns what, snapshot of the state. There's a last closed ledger, which is the current state of the network that's been agreed upon. And then each individual server or node has their own personal ledger called an open ledger in the bottom left. And then there's this concept that's heavily relied on the consensus algorithm called a unique node list. And each node maintains this list of participants that they rely on to help reach consensus. So it's their personal network of individuals who they're looking at to help reach consensus with. And then we have a proposer. So this is a server on the unique node list who proposes the transaction. So some don't have the permission to actually propose. I could spin up a node and get on the Ripple network, but nobody would take me seriously if I wanted to put transactions on, just because I'm not established. So I wouldn't be a proposer on somebody's list per se. So if that all makes sense, we can look at how their consensus algorithm actually works. First of all, it goes in several rounds until we get to this fourth step here, where 80% of a server's unique node list agrees on a transaction, and then we can make that transaction part of the last closed ledger. But before that happens, we go through steps 1 through 3 over and over again, where first we have each node makes public all the transactions that have been submitted to it but not applied. So let's say one of these nodes is a node that exists on an exchange and they had somebody withdraw. They would have that public transaction and they need to put that transaction out into all the other nodes so we can maintain consensus and everybody agrees on it, which is step 2. You're taking in transactions that you don't currently have from your unique node list, the people you rely on, and you either vote yes or no on those transactions. For the vast majority of them, you're just going to vote yes on. It's not a manual vote. It's just automated unless you have certain edge cases or boundaries that you say can't be crossed, and then you automatically vote no for those. And then you have these transactions with a minimum number of yes get passed on to the next round, and then transactions without get discarded. And you have this converging process until everything on your unique node list is over 80%, and then we consider it a block, and we close that ledger and we move on, and everybody propagates their transactions again. So where this gets a little hairy is they rely heavily on this variable in their equations called the probability of a consensus thwarting cartel, PFC. And the safety of the network relies on the likelihood of a collusion happening. Specifically, 20% or greater of the network poses a threat. 20% of the greater network, if they're in collusion, pose a huge threat, this increasing threat to the network, as compared to if we have something under 20% of the network colluding down here, where we have our different variables of PFC, so the probability of collusion. So effectively it's saying, with this blue line, if 20% of the network has the capability to collude, as the network grows, there's a higher probability of consensus being thwarted by that cartel. If we have the probability of a collusion, so 15% or less of the network know each other, then we actually have a decreasing probability of this collusion happening as this network grows. So I took this idea directly from the protocol white paper that they have, and I compared it up to the topology of the network that's going on right now. And the official page shows only 115 non-faulty nodes. I made my threshold voting yes over 90% of the time, because anything after that were just people spinning up nodes just to do it, or looked like sources that couldn't necessarily be trusted. So we have 115 of these nodes that we can say have a high uptime. They're relied on by the network. They're actually used nodes that are participating in consensus. And then within this set of 115, we have 54 of these nodes that have been verified according to the official site. So these are nodes registered by the Ripple site, but not necessarily owned by the Ripple site. So we have 54 verified nodes that I would feel comfortable spinning up a node and putting my unique node list on. And within that 54 verified, we see 14 of these nodes are Ripple.coms. That's 25%. So if we look at this network, we're right here almost. And I mean, this is only a 25% occlusion. According to their network statistics, we're looking at a 25% occlusion. So this line would be even more, growing even faster, and this dot would be higher, but just for reference, let's say it was only 20%. We're almost at a 45% risk of collusion if the network decided they wanted to. And that, in a nutshell, is exactly why everybody calls it a very centralized system, because if these Ripple.com nodes decided they wanted to collude with each other, then they could very easily work together to have an attack on the network. So that's my research.